I've got phones, and you can call in. It's Erick Erickson here, 877-973-7425. Delighted to have you with me today as we delve into right now Herschel Walker, potentially running for the United States Senate, the football legend, possibly entering the political arena. Let's go to the phones. I'm going to start with Jeremy. Welcome to the program, Jeremy.
Hey, Eric, how are you this afternoon?
Great.
Hello? Good. Quick comment on Herschel. Love being a football player. As a politician, I just don't know. And not only that, I don't think he has a lot of support in the African American community based on his political views. So that'd be kind of tough. My question is, I had heard some rumblings about his residency status, being that he lives in Texas. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, so he does live in Texas. My understanding is that he's trying to get back to become a resident of Georgia. He's got some time to be able to do that before qualifying and the like. There are different residency requirements between the United States Senate and, for example, the Georgia legislature. You got to live in your state for a year. In the U.S. Senate, you just got to live in the state. There's no residency requirement as long as you have intention to move and make a residency there. So he could do it. But the other issue here is the black community. How many will vote for Herschel Walker because he's black versus how many won't vote for him because he's conservative? And that in and of itself is going to have to be an issue that he deals with. You know, Republicans oftentimes decide, hey, we're going to nominate a black candidate because we're running against someone who's black. And I don't think you have to do that, actually. I really don't believe you have to nominate a black candidate on the Republican side if there's a black candidate on the Democratic side. You do also have to make inroads into the Hispanic community and others. I don't know that Republicans need to play racial politics. In fact, the data from 2020 shows Donald Trump and Mike Pence, two very white dudes, made inroads into the black and Hispanic community. It's the message matters. Warnock is going to lock up most of the black community because of his connections into black churches. Gary Black in South Georgia, the ag commissioner, may be able to take out Walker in a primary just by being the ag commissioner and having such good inroads in rural Georgia. It's going to be an interesting dynamic to see Gary Black versus Herschel Walker, in addition to all of the other people who are in there. You got Kelvin King will make a play for it, and then Latham Sadler, who the Navy SEAL in the metro Atlanta area and Columbus area, may be able to have an impact. I mean, Walker's going to be the dominant force on name ID, but name ID alone doesn't necessarily get you elected. It may be able to get you out of the primary. A buddy of mine texted me, and he says, Walker's got to remind Georgians, the last time UGA was a winner, he made it happen. There's a compelling campaign message for Herschel Walker right there. When he was on the field, Georgia was a winner, and he could make that play and remind people of that legacy. But again, part of the issue you got to remember is that in suburban metro Atlanta, where the bulk of the vote will come from, an overwhelming portion of the population are not native Georgians. They're transplants who came after he left to go play for Dallas in the NFL. And he stayed there. That's going to be something he's going to have to overcome. The phone number here is 877-973-7425. You're more than welcome to call in. We've got more folks who want to. We are a limited amount of time before the commercial break, so everybody stand by.
30.
We've got to talk about gun sales in this country. My gosh, have you heard about Smith & Wesson? This is crazy, and the Democrats are starting to really freak out about guns
15.
in this country in ways they haven't. I'm not talking gun violence. They're really freaking out about gun sales in this country. We'll talk about it when we come back. subscriber, I just sent out the buttermilk ice cream recipe. I promised it last week, and then I couldn't remember what I promised, and I got someone emailed me and said, "Hey, aren't you sending out that recipe?" So yes, there you got it. The buttermilk ice cream recipe. If you want to subscribe, text the word recipe. Let me make sure this one is working. It's supposed to work. You go 877-973-7425 is the number. And then you type in the word recipe, not plural, recipe, singular. And you do that, and allegedly it will work. But you can also do recipe to 33777. Yeah, the 33777 works. So sorry about that. All the phone companies are changing the way you do these lines, which is why we're having a problem. If you text recipe singular to 33777, you'll get a link. You click it, and you'll see a little form. You put in your name and your email address. I don't spam you. It's not for sale. You get a recipe a week. This week is buttermilk ice cream. Now, if you've not subscribed and you want the recipe, go to ErickEricksonShow.com or EWErickson.com. You'll see a tab for recipes, and it's there as well. It's a good recipe. My wife loves it. Now, we serve it on pound cake. It's delicious. All right, to the phones we go. Keep in mind, folks, in all seriousness, there's a little bit of a delay on the phone system. So when I get to you, just get straight to your point. We don't need to do the hello, how are you, all of that. So, for example, I'm going to go to the phones now, and I'm going to go to Tom in Canton, Georgia. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. I had two comments on Herschel Walker. If he has mental issues, that would probably disqualify him. And two, I think there's some kind of rule that you got to be a resident of the jurisdiction which you'll represent for X amount of time. I can't say because I haven't researched. And number two, on the Republicans giving up, that's the wrong answer. The only way we're going to get anything done is focus, stick to the issues, be positive, and get out and vote and encourage our neighbors. Either we're going to sit back and let the state go downhill, or we're going to step up and make it happen.
Amen to that. You're absolutely right, Tom. You're totally right on that. Republicans have got to show up. They've got to engage. They can't give up. Saw it happen in January when they sat home, convinced that the election was going to be stolen. Here's the reality. Under federal law, remember, the U.S. Senate is governed by the federal Constitution. The U.S. Senate is not governed by state law. Under state law, in most states, you've got to be a resident for a certain period of time. If you are not a resident of that for that period of time, you can't qualify. In Georgia, for example, I know it's a year. You've got to be a resident of the area you want to live. There are some exceptions, I think, to the rule, but the U.S. Constitution does not actually have that requirement. The U.S. Constitution requirement is you've just got to be a resident of the state. And the residency in that state is defined, of course, by law as to exactly how. I'm trying to pull up the particular provision. Yes, no person shall be a senator who shall not have attained the age of 30 years and been 9 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state for which he is chosen. That's the language of the Constitution, which is binding on everything else. So you've got to be 30 years old, a citizen of the United States, not of your state, but of the United States for 9 years, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state for which he shall be chosen. So in other words, when Herschel Walker is elected on election day, November next year, if elected, he will have to be a resident of the state of Georgia. That's it. That's the constitutional requirement. So I'm sure he can meet that if he goes on and moves into the state now. There's no question at all. You've got in Georgia, the 6th Congressional District, Lucy McBath, who her family lives in Tennessee, but she keeps a home in the 6th Congressional District and doesn't really live there, but no one's ever been able to challenge her. It's very, very nebulous, the federal requirements. It's very hard to challenge someone. Now, I want to address real quick, though, the mental health issue. Herschel Walker wrote a book about his mental health struggles. He's got multiple personality disorder. They call it now dissociative identity disorder, but I mean, most people, I think, call it multiple personality disorder. He wrote a book in 2008 called Breaking Free: My Life with Dissociative Identity Disorder. And he's been a very, very big advocate for mental health treatment programs for veterans. I don't think having a mental health issue is disqualifying. I mean, look at the current members of Congress. I don't think it's disqualifying. But I think he's going to have to own the issue. Who is it? Jim Inhofe. Jim Inhofe is U.S. Senator from Oklahoma. Jim Inhofe, when he ran the very first time, Jim Inhofe had gone through a terrible, messy bankruptcy. And when he announced his candidacy for the U.S. Senate, or maybe even the House, I think it was the Senate, though, gone through a very messy bankruptcy, and Jim Inhofe, he owned the bankruptcy. Jim Inhofe stood up and gave his press conference and said, essentially, and by the way, I wasn't around then, but I learned about this in campaign management school, how to take a weakness and make it a strength. He said he was running for the U.S. Senate because he was a small businessman and he had failed at small business repeatedly. He understood the struggles. He understood what small businesses face. He had been bankrupt trying to keep a small business afloat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he fully owned it, and it worked to his advantage. He was able to make the case that he was highly competent, highly qualified, and knew what it took to help small businesses because he had failed and also succeeded at them. Herschel Walker could do the exact same thing with his mental health issue, that he's running for the United States Senate because the only time George has ever been winning is when he was on the field. And his big issue is mental health. He suffers from mental health issues. He understands it. He understands it's a growing problem because of COVID lockdowns around the country. No one wants to address the issue. He's an expert at the issue. He's been working with veterans who have mental health. He could totally own the issue. Now, one of the issues, though, as well, is that the Democrats are going to try to push the needle and see if they can provoke him. That particular disorder can cause mood swings, among other things. And we will see also the impact of staff and the stress of running for office. Running for office actually is very stressful. It's more stressful when you're the staff, but it's very stressful as a candidate, and he's going to go through that as well if he does. All right, back to the phones we go. I'm going to go next to Jerry. Thanks for being patient with me.
Yes, sir. Hey, Eric, two quick things. One, regarding the left, they're really good at deflecting. And everything I'm seeing right now is just that, a deflection, whether it's the squad's latest comments or them saying Republicans are the ones who wanted to defund the police. I think these are just moves right now to take our eye off this huge federal power grab in this infrastructure bill. And I just want to make sure people are aware of that. And then regarding males being born as a male and then identifying as a female and wanting to play in women's sports, this is a rhetorical question, but it is, where are all the feminists? Because if I wanted to, I could now make the argument regarding women in sports is that basically what we're saying is that men are now better at being women than women are being at women when it comes to sports. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's basically what we're saying. And the feminists have just been silenced about it. And I would just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, listen, let me take the second one first, because there's actually an article over the weekend. In Great Britain, if you misgender someone, it's considered a hate crime, or at least it has been considered a hate crime in Great Britain. And a judge there has now ruled under their Human Equality Act that you can't say that because it could have a deleterious impact on women. And it is actually the feminist movement in Great Britain, not conservatives, not the church, but the feminist movement in Great Britain that has been fighting very, very hard against the transgender agenda, in large part because feminists in Great Britain have said that it's beginning to impact girls and women when they're competing against men who have become girls, or the boys are going into girls' locker rooms and the like. It's the feminists there who are pushing back. It is very interesting to see the pushback in Great Britain, which is very different from this country. Although feminists in this country are starting to talk a lot about it, particularly in light of the Olympics and what's going on with the Olympics and sports in this country. Like, for example, the Connecticut track transgender star who was in the 300th and 400th places for men became a girl and is now suddenly number one. And a lot of people are scratching their heads about that. It is a uniquely American phenomenon at this point. It is not even so much a Canadian or a British phenomenon, although there as well. But in continental Europe, Australia, New Zealand, this really is not a thing. Now, New Zealand, of course, is letting a transgender athlete go to the Olympics, shutting out a female who's crying foul, and it has become very sympathetic in New Zealand. But you don't see this in most of the world. It's a very uniquely Western phenomenon that's happening. Now, on the Democrats and infrastructure, this is becoming an issue. The federal government wants to have more say in broadband and in infrastructure around the country, in battery charging stations, in fuel efficiency standards and the like. And yeah, the Democrats are being distracted by it. Although there's a big story out today that the moderate Democrats in Washington, get this, it's the moderate Democrats up for re-election next year who are scuttling the Democrats' infrastructure plan. In the House of Representatives, they can only lose 3 votes in the House. The Democrats can. They can only lose 3 votes. So the moderate Democrats are now leveraging their power to scrap the Democrats' big infrastructure play. And now Joe Biden has come out overnight and said whatever is dealt with in the bipartisan agreement cannot be dealt with in their reconciliation plan. And that scraps a lot of what they want. So, for example, the left wants to put high-speed chargers in every neighborhood for electric vehicles. In the bipartisan agreement, $60 billion will be set aside for battery-powered vehicle infrastructure. That's not enough to fulfill the Democrats' wish list. And now Joe Biden overnight has said, if there's an issue that's dealt with in the bipartisan plan, it cannot be dealt with in the reconciliation plan. So their dreams of battery power everywhere is now out. They've also got some environmental standards in the in the bipartisan plan. And the result is that they're going to be shut out from dealing with that in the reconciliation plan. It's really making Democrats mad. All right, I've taken phone calls and I haven't been able to get to guns. So I'm going to go on and take a timeout because this story, Smith & Wesson, it is unbelievable. And it's giving Democrats a lot of heartburn today over this news. And you got to hear it.
Erick Erickson gives you the Show to 877-973-7425 now.
All right, because the call is relevant, I am going to hop over into phone calling here because Gary is calling from North Dakota, and he's on point with what I want to talk about. Gary, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Eric. I have to say, I really enjoy listening to your show, and I first heard of you when I was listening. You co-hosted for Rush Limbaugh a few years ago.
Thank you very much.
So that's where I first heard you. But anyway, what I'm going to talk about is the reason why people are buying guns. You know, and Democrats are buying guns too. It's because of the defunding of the police. And a lot of police officers are quitting because they're changing the rules and regulations so much that police officers are afraid they're going to be indicted for actually defending themselves. They're afraid of that. And of course, you got these weak-kneed prosecutors that will not put people in jail. They release them. I remember the BLM protesters were released from jail. The ones that actually committed violence were released. Well, that would scare anybody to buy firearms. That's the only thing they got left. If they have no police around, well, what are they going to do? Just be sitting targets, or are they going to be prepared to get defense?
That is exactly right.
I was trained in law enforcement myself years ago.
The data out there, Gary, and thanks very much for the phone call from North Dakota, no less, where it is definitely hot up there today in the weather forecast. Smith & Wesson. According to thereload.com, Smith & Wesson reported its best sales year ever in 2020. $1.1 billion in net sales. Net sales. Net sales is always lower than gross sales, and when your net sales are $1.1 billion, this is records. It is an increase of more than 100%. From 2019. According to Stephen Gutowski at thereload.com, this is a quote from the CEO. Our manufacturing logistics teams produced and shipped nearly 2.5 million units last fiscal year, representing a 70% increase year on year. While during the same time frame, the U.S. firearms market, as measured by the NICS, grew by 42%. During fiscal 2021, we invested in our business and our people. We repaid back all of our bank debt. We repurchased over 10% of our outstanding common stock, and we began paying our shareholders a quarterly dividend for the first time in company history, said Deanna McPherson, the CFO. Our board has authorized a new $50 million share repurchase program, as well as a 60% increase in our quarterly dividend to 8 cents per share. This is incredible. Now, my buddy Phil has texted me, Glock sold 3.5 million guns in 2020 and can't keep up with production. The Democrats would have you believe there is no crime wave. The Democrats would have you believe there's no crime wave. The American public clearly thinks there's a crime wave. Now, the Democrats are actually really concerned about this. You know, Joe Biden, when he wanted to announce his crackdown on crime, made it a gun violence issue. And that didn't go over very well with people because it sounded like denial. It was denial. You know what you call gun owners in this country? Republicans. I mean, Gary from North Dakota pointed out Democrats were buying them as well. Yes. And the more guns you get in your house, and guns are like tattoos. Once you get one, you got to buy more. And as Democrats start stockpiling weapons to protect themselves, they move to the right. Maybe not on everything, but enough. And it becomes harder and harder for Democrats to make a case for gun control in this country when more and more Americans are actually learning to control their guns on firing ranges because they know they've got to protect themselves. $1.1 billion in net sales for Smith & Wesson is insane. That is a lot of money, and that is a lot of guns sold. Smith & Wesson reported net sales jumped in their latest quarter, coming in at $322.9 million. The quarterly sales jumped 67.3% over the same quarter from the previous year. The spike comes after the company boosted production by 60% and hired nearly 300 new employees. Now, some people are worried about a boom and bust cycle, that if they go out and they make build new factories and hire more people to make more guns and ammo, that if the crime wave goes away and the gun sales collapse, well, then they're going to have to shut down factories and lay people off. But a lot of people are thinking the situation is getting so dire and so many people are buying ammo. That's why we've got an ammo shortage in the country. It is very hard to find ammunition in the country right now. And it is because so many people are buying guns, new gun owners, and they're stockpiling ammunition like the rest of us. I mean, I haven't even gone to the gun range in a while because I don't want to waste my ammo. And a lot of people are in that situation. I went to the gun range, gosh, it's been, so my in-laws live in Carrollton, Georgia. There is a gun range there. We're on in Carrollton. Hi there. And Shot Spot in Carrollton is my favorite place to go shoot guns. I love that place. They have the best gun range I've ever been to. And I went there a while back, and man, even they were saying their ammo is hard to come by. In fact, I went in there for Father's Day. I was looking at getting the Super Black Eagle Benelli turkey shotgun, and they had some, but they didn't have that one. They were low on guns and low on
30.
ammunition, and they're totally, they've got great supplies too. You can find something there that you can't find in a lot of places, and still they're having a hard time keeping stuff on the shelves because so many people are buying, because people are having to protect themselves because the Democrats are defunding
15.
the police. When we come back, they're about to defund the Board of Elections in New York City.
10.
This story is too good to pass up. Well, I wanted to talk about the New York mayoral election so we could laugh together, but there are two pieces of breaking news that I have got to get to before I do anything else. Welcome back. It's Erick Erickson, the second hour. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Later today, Bill Cosby, the comedian, will be released from prison. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has thrown out his case. He's been serving time in prison, and this is pretty horrific. And of all things, I'm going to TMZ on this news. My goodness gracious. There are two reasons the conviction could not stand. The Pennsylvania High Court has ruled today it was unduly prejudicial to allow 5 women with stories similar to Andrea Costin to testify, trying to show Bill Cosby had an MO for drugging women and then sexually assaulting them. The second reason was found during the trial. Former District Attorney Bruce Castor cut a deal with Cosby. If he testified in a civil deposition, he would not face trial criminally. During the deposition, Cosby made incriminating statements about drugging women, and it was presented at trial. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ruled the deal was broken by the prosecutors. A judge had vacated the conviction of the sentence and ordered the 83-year-old released immediately. The court ruled that not only is Bill Cosby a free man, but he cannot be retried. He served 3 years of a 10-year sentence. Bill Cosby's legal team is actually headed to prison now to pick him up. So here's essentially, there are a couple of things that happened in Cosby's situation. The first is that he agreed to testify in a civil case. He was being sued civilly, and the district attorney in Pennsylvania said, if you will testify in the civil case, you will not be prosecuted. In the civil case, in a deposition, Cosby admitted to pretty much everything. A new DA came into office and decided to press charges against Cosby. The old DA had said there would be no charges if he said everything. So the Supreme Court has thrown out the case for that, but then there was something else. During the trial, the district attorney brought in multiple other women. Cosby was on trial for assaulting a woman, and the district attorney brought in 5 other women with similar stories that were not revealed prior to the trial to build the case. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. You're supposed to give the defense everything you've got. And they clearly had these women before the trial, and they waited to spring the trap after the trial, and that was a party foul. They wanted to be so sure they convicted Cosby that they took shortcuts they should not have taken. And as a result, Bill Cosby will be released from prison, and he will not be allowed to be retried. He has served for 3 of a 10-year sentence. Man, that release party is going to be something, isn't it? Don't drink the punch. Listen, here's the thing. Bill Cosby is one hell of a comedian. He's also clearly a monster people did not know. He was, and so when I was a kid, what was the show that Bill Cosby did? I can still remember sound effects. He would can't remember the show.
Spy?
No, it wasn't that one. It was a kid show on Nickelodeon that I watched when I was a kid, and I cannot remember the name of it now. I got to look, but he was in
Fat Albert.
Spy. He was in what's that, Jim?
Fat Albert.
No, so it wasn't Fat Albert. Fat Albert. I loved Fat Albert. Fat Albert so when I grew up in Dubai. Our shows were very limited in what we watched, but Fat Albert was on TV and I loved it. And of course, The Cosby Show. I absolutely adored The Cosby Show growing up. It was one of the greatest. It to this day remains a fantastic television show, but it's now, of course, deeply problematic given what we know about Bill Cosby behind the scenes. And what's so very interesting is that for years, Bill Cosby was a darling of the left because he would attack the Republican Party based on race issues. And later in life, Bill Cosby became very critical of a lot of their a lot of the things the Democratic Party was doing to stabilize the black family, and they turned on him. And it was a remarkable piece of turning on Cosby after years of his buildup. And then, of course, everything else. Picture Pages. Yes. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Picture Pages with Bill Cosby. Yes. That's the show I remember. I watched that show as a kid. And of course, Jell-O pudding pops. I regret to this day, they don't make Jell-O pudding pops. Jell-O pudding pops were fantastic. And Bill Cosby was the pitch man for them. And now I realize that the ones at his house were probably drugged. Gosh. Yes, but it was Picture Pages. I watched that show on Nickelodeon when I was a kid. That and that and the Cosby Show. So, they did not have the Cosby Show in Dubai. And we would come home during the summer, and during the summer season, now kids, this is the way I grew up. Shut up, Philip. Shut up. Back in the 80s and 90s, you would have the summer season where they would show the reruns of the stuff that aired live in the fall. And so we would come home during the summer and you would have the reruns. And then 3 years later in Dubai, we would get the same show. Like, I remember Who Shot JR back when I was a little kid. I must have been 6 years old. And then like 3 years later, we got that episode in Dubai and I knew who shot him. Well, he was shot several times. If y'all don't know the reference, just shut up. Nonetheless, we didn't get the Cosby Show in Dubai, but my wife loved the Cosby Show, and it was a good show. All right, to review this breaking news, because I got to move on to other breaking news. This breaking news: Bill Cosby is being released from prison. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court has overturned his conviction, saying it was based on tainted testimony. Prosecutors are precluded from trying him again based on the existing evidence and procedures. And again, one of the key points that is deeply, deeply, deeply troublesome is that the prosecutors told Bill Cosby if he would submit to a deposition in a civil lawsuit and admit everything, they would not try him, according to the finding of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. He did so, admitted everything, and then an incoming prosecutor prosecuted him. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is saying that violated the terms of the deal, allowing him to confess and not giving him a Fifth Amendment right. Pretty big deal. Pretty big case sabotage. It sounds very much like the DA was so aggressive for a conviction, they took too many shortcuts and have run afoul of the Constitution. There is outside of Georgia. I realize that this may not be a big deal to you, but it actually should be a big deal to everyone. The former mayor of Atlanta, Kasim Reed, who looks like he's mounting a comeback because of Keisha Crime Wave